It's that time to rank 30 movies chosen by you. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a good one today. I'm the Movie Ranker, and today's the day I give back to the YouTube community. I'm going to rank 30 films. All of them are chosen by you guys. 30 subscribers, 30 movies. Here we go. Quick disclaimer, of course something has to be last place and something has to be first place. So don't take my ranking too seriously. It's just my personal taste of what I think is the worst or the best. It's just my opinion, of course. Don't take it to heart. If you love these movies that are lower on my list, that's perfectly fine. And let me tell you, this was tough because we have movies from the 60s all the way up to modern times. We have all sorts of genres, from action to westerns to horror. So yeah, really hard to place these, but I came up with a list of 30 from worst to best. So we're gonna get right into it. Just make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and of course I could only take 30 movies. Any more and this would have been way too big of a list to try to put out this soon. So unfortunately I couldn't take everybody's suggestion, but the first 30 movies suggested did make the list. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. So coming in the last place at number 30, I'm going with the movie Knock Knock. This was requested by Zero Charisma, so thank you for that. And yeah, this was my least favorite watch out of these 30 movies. Kind of an interesting concept with these two hot chicks showing up at your door when you're home alone and your family's gone, and they're trying to seduce you and everything. And of course, you're going to have to pay the price if you actually sleep with them because you have a family. And yeah, interesting concept. I just feel like they forgot they were making a thriller. In the second half, it lacks tension, it lacks thrills. I thought we were going to get a pretty good final act, but I just don't like the way things played out. It ends with a kind of heavy-handed message that all guys are pigs and will sleep with women and cheat on their wives if given the proper opportunity, which is bullshit. I mean, yeah, these are two incredibly hot women in the film. I mean, Ana de Armas and Lorenzo, I think her name is. It's the wife of Eli Roth who directed this. Both very fine women. But that doesn't mean that every guy would give in to this. You know, pretty terrible message. And the fact that they don't acknowledge what they're doing wrong, how they're stalking this family and learning about them to know that they're taken off and the husband's going to be staying at home. And they're homewreckers. You know, they're purposely trying to break up this family, so they're no better. And I feel like that's not acknowledged in the film. It's only guys are all pieces of shit, basically, is what the message is trying to say. So I wasn't a big fan of that. The acting is pretty bad in here too. The girls do a fine job. I mean, they come off as hot and psychotic, which is what the film was going for. They were great. Keanu Reeves, probably his worst performance I've ever seen. It's very, I don't know, when he's pleading with the women and everything, I'm not buying it. There's a few times he gives his best Nicolas Cage impersonation. He starts going crazy and stuff. It was free pizza. So yeah, a movie not for me, but to be fair, I watched this with two other people and they both really enjoyed this. So again, if you like this movie, there's nothing wrong with that, but it just didn't work for me personally. Up next at number 29, I'm going with the movie Chopping Mall, requested by Keem's Lemon. So thank you for that. A movie I have seen in the past, and I've grown to enjoy it a lot more than I did in the past. I thought it was garbage the first time I watched it. This time I kind of knew what I was getting myself into. It's very cheesy, very schlocky 80s film. You know, it's like a slasher but with these security robots instead of an actual person with an axe or anything. And for starters, I do like that this location, this mall, and it's a real mall. It's not a set or whatever. It's the same mall they used the film Commando, interesting enough. And that's great. A lot of familiar faces in here too when it comes to horror. A guy from Friday the 13th Part 2. We get the chick from Night of the Comet. Dick Miller's in here, who's always great to see in every film. So that's kind of great. And yeah, you can definitely have fun with this movie, but it is extremely dumb. For starters, the security bots that go haywire once electricity, once lightning hits the building and screws up with their tech. These robots kind of just go on a killing spree, killing everybody in this mall at night. And these group of teens go in there to party and sleep with each other. Obviously, it's a slasher movie, right? But these robots are like short circuit looking and they're on tracks. So to me, it's just really ridiculous how they can't get away from them. Like, go climb a ladder or go to the basement or on the roof or something. There must be a way to get away from these guys, you know? And they're armed to the teeth. Like, for these security robots, they got like military grade weapons. They're shooting laser beams, which sometimes does a lot of damage, other times don't seem to do much to people. So it's really inconsistent. And yeah, it's just a really cheesy, dumb movie. You really have to turn off your brain in here to watch it, to really enjoy it. And that's what I did going in. I just kind of had a better time this time around because I knew it was a dumb, fun slasher, right? And that's exactly what it is. If you're going in here expecting like a good slasher movie, you're not going to get it. I think this concept could have been done a lot better if they had obviously a bigger budget. There was like $800,000 budget or something on this thing, which is ridiculous for the concept they were going for. I think this would work much better with a real slasher, like a guy going around with an axe. That would have been even more interesting and would have made for more tension and horror aspects, you know? Because, yeah, those robots look ridiculous. And like I said, they're on track, so they can't really get to you everywhere in the mall. But they try fighting back these kids. They make bombs like propane and you shoot them with guns. And they got gas, which I never heard of a mall where you can go into a store and buy gasoline. It's kind of ridiculous. But again, very dumb movie. Barbara Crampton is in here, which she's always nice to see. And she's great at the start. But once shit goes down, she's kind of the annoying character. Always screaming and complaining nonstop. So not a biggest fan of her character in here. There's a whole scene where they're in the vents trying to escape and the robots realize they're in there, so they turn up the heat and they complain about how hot it is and everything, but they're moving so slow. They probably move a foot in 10 minutes and they're like, I can't do it, and screaming, and it's like, oh my god, you're annoying. But yeah, just really dumb decisions by all these group of teens. Of course, that comes with the horror genre and with slashers, but I feel like they're even more dumb in this film. But again, you can kind of turn off your brain, have a few beers with your friends, and enjoy this, kind of laughing at it, but there's still some fun to be had. There's a couple cool little kills in here that are kind of inventive, so it is what it is. Not a great movie, but it's almost, it doesn't quite reach the so bad it's good. It's just kind of in the middle for me, if that makes any sense. Up next at number 28, I'm going with Cinema Paradiso, which is an Italian film chosen by Film Kid. Thanks for the request. And I'm not the biggest fan of drama films. This is a foreign movie, so it was subtitles as well, which I don't mind if I'm enjoying the movie. But this one, the first half was interesting to me. I was locked in with the first half. It's about this kid who's really in love with movies. He's always at the theater, hangs out with the projectionist, who's a really cool dude named Alfredo. And they form this bond together. And the kid's a little troublemaker. He's always getting in trouble, but it's just really fun to see his love for movies, of course, being a movie fan myself. And the movie, the first half is like him as a kid, and then it starts showing him later in life as a young adult, then as in present time as an older adult. And like I said, as soon as they switch from kid to young adult, the film kind of loses me. I find it loses its pacing. It becomes a bit of a chore to get through. It becomes less interesting to me because you learn about his relationship he's formed with this girl, and he ends up in the army and all this stuff, but it's not told in a very satisfying way. For me anyway, personally. This movie has a lot of love out there. It got like a 9 out of 10 online, so it definitely has its fans. I do really appreciate all the going through time and seeing film change over the years, and this is showing you specifically the censorship in Italy at the time. Like back in the day, they used to have a priest come in and tell them the parts of the movie to cut out every time someone kissed or anything. None of that could have been in the film back then, due to the censorship and that they had. So, and as the years go by, you see the color added into the film. You see them adding more sexual stuff into there. It becomes less bad over the years. So all that was super interesting, and learning about the film, how it was super flammable back in the day, and over time it got more modernized. So all that's super cool. Like I said, I really enjoy Alfredo's character throughout the entire film. Toto, he's better as a kid and as the later adult, because we don't get a whole bunch of screen time on that. And this film is basically like Toto's reflection on his life throughout the years. And they do a really good job at that. It just comes down to, it's just not my personal taste, this type of a drama story. So sorry that it's this slow, but it is what it is. Up next at number 27, I'm going with Cry Wolf. And this was requested by Michael Evans. Thanks for the request. A film I always wanted to check out. I remember seeing the trailer for this when it came out, before another movie I was watching at the time. I probably rented something and this trailer was on. And yeah, I was like, ooh, this looks super interesting. And then I kind of forgot about the film, never ended up seeing it, and then never really heard much about it over the years. So I'm glad this got requested. I finally got to watch it. And it's decent. It has a really interesting original concept where this group of friends at a school, this boarding school, like private school, they play this game called Cry Wolf. And at first it's just amongst themselves and they're trying to pick out who's the liar and whatnot. But then they decide to up the stakes and play with the entire school. They make up this serial killer because a girl gets murdered for real nearby in the woods. So they decide to create this killer, give him a look and everything, and send like emails to all the students and that, and saying that the killer is on the loose and he'll return on the next full moon. But what happens is people actually start dying off in the school. There actually ends up being a real killer, and you're trying to figure out who's behind this mystery. Is it one of the group of friends who are still playing the game, or is it something more sinister, something more real happening? And that is all super interesting. All the way up to the end, we get this big twist reveal on what's really going on, and it's okay. The twist, I feel like it's really asking you to suspend your belief quite a bit. It's like, how in hell did this plan actually all work out the way it did? It's pretty crazy, but it's still decent. I really like the concept of this, and it's really original, and it feels like something we never seen before, which is great. I just wish that besides the twist being kind of just mediocre, I wish that the slasher part of the film would have been better. Like when the killer's going around, if it would have had better effects and just better kills and more tension throughout, I think that would really put this movie a lot higher up in my list, because it's kind of mediocre when it comes to the horror and slasher elements in here, but it got a great story. And it has that vibe, that feeling of the post Scream movies, the late 90s, early 2000s. This kind of still has that, and it came out in 2005, so it still kind of had that vibe, which is like a time capsule in itself. So still worth a watch, I'd say. Up next at number 26, I'm going with Wishmaster, and this was requested by OOFFOO, or OOFFOO. So thanks for this request. Another movie I was always interested in checking out. I mean, a horror movie involving this genie type creature named Jinn, Djinn or whatever. Like, that sounds super interesting to me. We don't get enough like genie type horror films, so this is really cool. It features tons of horror cameos and actors, so I can't remember them all, but I remember Kane Hodder being in here, Robert Englund, so there's tons of people to recognize. The wishes themselves obviously don't turn out the way people want them to, and the effects involving their deaths or whatever is really good. You'd swear Tom Savini or whatever did the effects on here, because they look that great when they're talking about practical effects anyway. I'm not sure who did the effects on here, but they did a great job. When it comes to the practical stuff, the special effects, of course, this was in the 90s, so they don't look great at all. Fortunately, there's not a whole lot of it, but a few times it's pretty bad, pretty outdated if you ask me. But yeah, just love this concept. This Djinn or whatever is going around granting people one wish in exchange for their soul. And at the very end, when he has enough power, with all the souls he collected, he gets to meet the main girl who brought him into the real world, and he grants her 3 wishes like a regular genie. But the catch is, once he fulfills the 3 wishes, it opens a portal from his world to our world, and all the other jinns will come in and take over, basically. So they're really evil. They're really dark. And yeah, it's a pretty crazy film. The look of the Jin himself, he kind of reminds me of like a Power Rangers character or something. He's a little goofy looking, but like I said, the kills make up for it, that's for sure. The storyline can move along a bit clunky and messy at times, so I think that could have been tightened up, written a bit better, but this is a movie that would be great for a remake if you get the right person behind the camera. And definitely go practical when it comes to effects for the most part. So I would love to see a remake of this. This one was decent enough. It showed potential on what they could do with this concept. So I enjoyed this one quite a bit. I just want to give a quick shout out to one of the kills that were super memorable to me when they're in the cop station and the Jin makes that guy start shooting cops and stuff. At one point he grabs a guy's jaw and just rips it off, and it looks so gnarly. That was definitely a huge standout scene for me personally. So if this film ever piqued your interest, give it a chance. It's not amazing or anything, but it's definitely, again, worth a watch. Up next at number 25, I'm going with Society. This was requested by Extra, with extra A's on it, Extra 2649. So thanks for the request. A movie, again, that I always wanted to check out, but unfortunately the twist ending was always, I always knew it. It feels like forever. Seen clips of it everywhere over the years, so it's kind of like Sleepaway Camp. When you already know the ending, it kind of ruins the experience that you would have if you didn't know the ending. But yeah, it's pretty gnarly. If you've seen this, I hate to spoil it, but if you've seen this, you know what I'm talking about. That whole shunting at the end, it's gross, it's bizarre, it makes you shake your head in disbelief. The things that happen at the end of this movie, and the effects for it are insanely good, like real good. It's like the way the skin like mixes with the other skin, and the goo, and it's disgusting. Let's just say that, but it's also kind of hilarious at the same time, the way it plays out. So again, I don't want to get into too much spoilers. If you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out, and I hope you know nothing about it. Go into it completely blind, because I'd be interested to hear that experience. But for me, I never got to have that experience, so I always kind of knew what the movie was leading to, unfortunately. But I think they do a good job on building on the mystery, like if you didn't know what was going on, because you're kind of in line with the main character, because he suspects his family may not be his real parents or his real sister. He suspects maybe he's adopted because he's so different from them. And yeah, along the movie, as it goes along, he's picking up more and more clues that perhaps he doesn't belong in his family, and this whole town seems kind of weird. So yeah, again, I just don't want to say much more, because it's just such a crazy oddball experience. Even me knowing what was going on, there's still a few moments that kind of put me in shock. So again, it's kind of one of those movies where I don't know how hard it would hit the second time around once you know what's going on, but definitely another movie that is a cult classic for good reason. Like, if you're not into horror, you probably would have never heard of this movie or even know it existed, but I'm kind of glad I do, because it's just so out there. Up next, at number 24, I chose Legally Blonde, and this was requested by Matthew Jolly. So thanks for the request. A film I haven't seen for probably 20 years or so, since it came out, probably, and I remember enjoying it for what it was. You know, not exactly my type of film. Kind of plays out a bit like a rom-com breakup movie for pieces of it, and other times it feels like a courtroom drama. Of course, there's comedy all mixed out from start to finish of this film, which really keeps it tight, keeps it easy to watch. It kind of flies by. It definitely has great pacing. And yeah, I actually found the humor pretty good, which was surprising because I didn't remember much about the flick. Reese Witherspoon is friggin' amazing as our main lead here. And, you know, breaking the stereotypes that all dumbs are blonde. Of course, this character is very, like, ditzy and into fashion and all that stuff. But she is smart. She does have brains. And, you know, she proves that by making it into Harvard and taking on this court case and everything. I like the way it all plays out, and how she uses her own background, her street smarts, if you will, or fashion smarts and stuff, and relationship knowledge to actually solve parts of the court case, which is great. A great way to tie that in there. And I think it's just a great message overall that you can do anything you put your mind to. Don't let anybody put you down or make you think that you're not good enough, because you are. And again, like getting rid of that blonde stereotype. And that whole speech that Reese Witherspoon's character gives at the end is just fantastic. And all the rest of the supporting cast is great too. Jennifer Coolidge, always love seeing her. She's pretty funny in here. Oh, Luke Wilson, Selma Blair, they're all great in here. So a pretty damn good flick for the type of movie it is. Up next at number 23, I'm going with Any Which Way You Can. And this was requested by 80s Movies fan, so thanks for the request. This is a sequel to Every Which Way But Loose, starring Clint Eastwood. And yeah, these two movies, the sequel and the original, are pretty on par for me. If I had to choose which one was better, I'd probably choose the sequel just by a little bit. I think it's a bit tighter in its storyline. While the first movie is like a road trip kind of movie at one part, this one, it's just much more tighter in its screenplay. I like that Clint Eastwood's like a fighter in these films, and he actually gets involved with the mafia this time, where he ends up fighting a guy that the mafia has on their side. So, of course, with all these bets and rich people that get involved, it makes for this whole big scenario. So I think that was great. And again, it's just a much more focused type story. As for the humor, I think the humor was way better in this one. The first movie had some funny moments, but it was a little over the top and ridiculous at times, a little too goofy. This one has its moments, but I thought I laughed a lot more throughout. Different things like when Ma's driving the tow truck and has the car on behind and parts keep flying off, and by the end she has nothing left. And the movie's just filled with funny moments like that. I think William Smith does a great job as Clint Eastwood's counterpart who he has to fight. And the way that they go about, like, because they end up becoming friends at one part, which is really weird because they know they have to fight each other later. Then they're not sure if they should fight or anything. And I like all that discussion that them two have and how they come to terms with what they have to do. I think that's all great. Of course, Clyde's awesome, the orangutan in these movies. He's in both. And I love when he's like, right turn, Clyde, because you stick your arm out when you're on a bike or something, right? For a right turn, going around a turn. But every time he gets him to do that, he's always like punching someone in the face, which is hilarious. My only nitpick about this flick is his girlfriend, Clint Eastwood's girlfriend in here. She, at the end of the first movie, you find out that she wanted nothing to do with him and all that. And in this one, at the start, it kind of just erased all that. And she'd be like, yeah, well, I changed my mind. It's just like, what? Kind of undoes the ending of part one, but it's whatever. These are comedy films, they're not to be taken too seriously. And yeah, and I had a lot of fun with this flick. Up next, at number 22, I'm going with The Fifth Element. And this was requested by Skywalker7. Thanks a lot for that request. The Fifth Element, a really nostalgic movie for me. I remember watching it a lot growing up. Used to come on TV a lot. Used to rent it a lot. So, an interesting film that doesn't really get talked about all that often nowadays. Does it hold up? Kinda. It's not as great as I remember it being as a kid. It still has some iconic scenes, some great characters and everything. Good storyline. It's just, again, the storyline's a bit messy, a bit clunky. I feel like it could have been a bit more tighter, but it is a bit of a convoluted story at the end of the day, like to try to explain to the audience. So I get that it would probably hard to translate from screenplay onto the screen itself. So not really faulting them for that, because it still is a very interesting story where this type of evil comes every couple thousand years to destroy Earth or take it over or whatever. And our weapon against that is these 5 elements. We got 4 elements, obviously, like wind, fire, water, that stuff. But the 5th element was like this super being. She's played by Mila Jovovich, and she is the 5th element. She's like this higher being, if you will. And her name is Lilu in this, and this is probably one of my favorite Mila Jovovich roles. It really put her on the map, I feel. Just her look itself with the red hair, orange hair, or whatever. And it's almost like it's not a cyberpunk film, but the way people dress in that in this dystopian future is really wacky with weird flashy colors and stuff. Bruce Willis is our main lead in here, and he's a taxi driver, and he ends up having a run-in with Lilu and learns that he must help her to save the world. She is the secret weapon basically against this evil, so that's all super great. Bruce Willis does a pretty damn good job as the lead as well, and our villain is played by none other than Gary Oldman, and damn does he do a good job. Another person I kind of forgot was in this film, and he has this like weird like half plastic thing on his head, so he got kind of an iconic look as well. And yeah, he is great as our villain, who's like a weapons dealer type guy, but he's really working for the ultimate evil power at the end of the day. Aside from a little bit of a messy story, I felt like there should have been more action in here. I don't know why I was expecting like an action-packed film where we only get like 2 really big action scenes, and one of them is near the end of the film, which is a great action scene at the whole opera house. And that blue girl too, she's so iconic with the way she's singing opera and stuff, just so damn cool. But one thing I always remembered about this flick, even from when I was a kid and I was excited to see it, was Chris Tucker's character. He's like this crazy radio host on here who dresses in drag and he's always screaming like a girl and everything every time bad guys are showing up in that, and every time he's in danger. He is so funny in here, and he really adds in the perfect amount of comedy to this movie because it can get pretty bleak at times. It does a great job of mixing sci-fi, action, comedy, all this together in this really unique way. It's a story that could have been told a bit better at the end of the day, but still, for a 90s flick with great actors, this is definitely one I'll be returning to again in the future. Up next at 21, I'm going with Animal House. Now, this was chosen by my good friend and co-worker Steven Savoy, and yeah, definitely an important film in comedy. In the 70s, this was at the time, I think, the highest grossing comedy of all time when it came out. It's the first National Lampoon's movie, which is another big thing. And it really influenced so many of these sorority type comedies. There's so many of them now, but I feel like this was one of the first that was at least this big at the time, and it deals with a lot of the tropes that we see nowadays, with sororities pranking each other, like the different sorority houses, and getting each other into trouble, and the partying, and everything that comes with these university college type flicks. Like movies like Old School really owe a lot to films like Animal House, so there's no taking anything away from this film. It's pretty damn funny too. We got John Belushi in here as one of the sorority guys, and he is such a party animal. Karen Allen in here. We got the dude from the Twisted Sisters music video. I think it's We're Not Going to Take It. The dad who's yelling at the son, "This isn't music." Well, he's in this film, obviously before Twisted Sisters and everything. So, and he is kind of doing the same character in here, just being a big dickhead, douchebag, always yelling at people and stuff. So it's kind of cool to see him in here, and just all the shenanigans that they get themselves into, like bringing the horse into the school and saying they had the guns filled with blanks and everything to try to scare him, and just golfing, hitting golf balls at when they're like dressed up in cadets and stuff. So many damn funny scenes in here, and yeah, it's a good film. Reaching my top 20, I'm going with The Substance. Brand new movie, 2024. It's even gotten nominated for awards and everything, which is great for the horror community. A film that, when I first watched it, it was so overhyped, and I was going with such high expectations that I didn't know what to think when it finished. I liked it, but I didn't love it. I knew I needed a rewatch because it's a lot to take into this type of film, and I just rewatched it the other day, and there's so many details that you miss on your first watch. Just little things in the cinematography, like at the starting, it shows Elizabeth Sparkle's star on Hollywood, and how someone drops a hamburger with ketchup on it and everything, and that really foreshadows what happens at the end of the film. So all these little things and Easter eggs and references and like influences, again, like The Shining. There's scenes where they're going down the hallway and it feels like you're in the Overlook Hotel, which is really cool. But the film does stand on its own. It doesn't just influences and stuff. It's definitely a really unique type of sci-fi flick. Of course, if you don't know the story, the substance is something that people take to get a better version of them, and this other version of them literally comes out of their back. And they take turns 7 days on, 7 days off with the two bodies. Like, really unique concept. Probably would have worked better as a short story in an anthology, but it still works as this 2 hour 20-minute film. Little overstretched, but not much. um the effects are insane in here, so good, mostly practical, but even the digital effects look really good as well. Like when you see people's backs splitting open and people being deformed and stuff, really great. But what really makes this movie is the themes and the messages, and talking about how women are treated in general, not just in Hollywood, over their beauty. And over time, they lose their beauty when they get old, and a lot of things aren't the same, you know? Whether they're looking in the mirror and it's a self type thing, or when guys are no longer a cat calling them, or holding the door open for them over time once they get older. So it has a lot to say about all of that. There's a lot of themes in here. I can't get into everything, whether we're talking about how the males treat the women in this film and how they don't really have to deal with that getting older because it doesn't really affect them. They're not putting on makeup and that to begin with. And the self-acceptance is a big thing in here, especially with Demi Moore's character, Elizabeth, the main character. How she sees what people are starting to look, how people are starting to look at her, and it gets in her head, and now she's always staring at herself in the mirror and doesn't think she's good enough anymore, and kind of goes into this depression state. And I like how, when you get two versions of her, the young her, Sue, and the older her, Elizabeth, how Sue ends up being the girl who wants to go out and be seen and shown and everything. And she resents Elizabeth because of the way she is, right? And it's the other way around. When Elizabeth comes out, she's super depressed and starts eating and everything, right? So this movie has so much to say that I can't cover everything. And of course, Demi Moore does a fantastic job, as well as Margaret Qualley. She's so damn fine too. But both of them give an amazing performance. Dennis Quaid too, but he's freaking disgusting in this film. There's a lot of gross things in here, but Dennis Quaid is one of the biggest friggin' disgusting things in this flick when he's eating shrimp and everything. So damn gross. But yeah, definitely a unique film. The ending's not going to be for everybody. The ending kind of works for me, kind of doesn't. It didn't work for me at all the first time I watched it. I'm accepting it a bit more on this rewatch. Perhaps in the future I'll accept it even more. But as of now, definitely a unique film in a time where nothing's unique anymore or original in 2024. So I really appreciate this film for a lot of reasons. It's definitely not my favorite film of the year or anything like that, but I definitely respect the hell out of it. Oh, and sorry about that. I forgot to give the shout out for this film. This film was requested by CSS Tales Forever. So thank you for this request. And yeah, The Substance, go check it out. Up next, at number 19, we got another brand new flick, Abigail. This was requested by Ricky Jones. Thanks for the request. Another 2024 flick, and another damn fun one. I just wish they wouldn't have gave everything away in the trailer about the vampire kid. Because this little girl, I mean, if you would have not have known anything going into this, it would have been quite the twist. I feel like they gave away a little too much in the trailer. It could have been a great experience like From Dusk Till Dawn, where halfway through the movie it switches and becomes a horror. I think that would have been great. But aside from that, it's still a really fun flick from the guys from Radio Silence, who did Ready or Not, the newer Scream films. And this kind of has the same vibe of that. Good amount of action, horror, and comedy in here. And the pacing is great. Alicia Ware, I think that's how you say her name, the kid, Abigail, she does such a damn good job at playing this kind of creepy, kind of innocent looking vampire, ballerina vampire, which is really unique. Melissa Barrera also does a great job as our main lead. And these are all like bad people who are breaking in, so they kind of get what they deserve. But at the same time, you're kind of still rooting for them in certain scenes. And by the end, where Abigail kind of has to work with Melissa Barrera's character, I think that was just really cool and different. Didn't see it coming. So for a movie that kind of had a lot spoiled in the trailer, there's still enough there to keep things interesting where I didn't see that was going to happen. I'm just curious, is this going to tie in with the Universal film somehow? Because this is considered part of the Universal Monsters universe. So I'm kind of interested to see where they're going to go with it from here. But either way, I like the kills. I like all the vampire lore that's thrown in here and how it goes from kidnap movie to horror movie like that. And the whole ending was a lot of fun. So it's bloody, it's fun, and there's a couple of really funny moments in here, especially when Sammy gets the friggin' onions instead of the garlic. I always laugh at that. So yeah, Abigail, pretty damn good flick as well. At number 18, we got The Conjuring. This one was chosen by Brett from Good Real Hunting, so thanks for the request. I know it's one of your favorite movies of all time, and it's a pretty damn good supernatural haunted house, type movie. One of these possession type movies. It's one of my least favorite genres, so that's maybe why it's lower on my list. But this is not a bad film at all. It just, again, going with my personal taste here. But this one does a great job at delivering the scares and the suspense and the tension without using cheap jump scares all the time. There are jump scares in here, but I feel like they're used really well and they're not cheap at all. One in particular being the clapping scene. Oh, such a cool concept, like to have these kids play this game and then the demon using it or whatever. So cool, so clever. The Warrens are awesome in here. They're definitely a big highlight for me in this film. Vera Farmiga, Patrick Wilson, I believe. They are so good in here, and you really buy their relationship and their job. As for the other characters, like the family they're dealing with, I feel like they're kind of forgettable. I've seen this movie I don't know how many times, and I could never remember one of their names or how many kids are in this family or whatnot. I feel like part two of The Conjuring kind of does a better job at dealing with the family and getting to know them and root for them. But this one, I'm definitely rooting for the Warrens. It's more about them for me anyway. I'm more interested in them, but like I said, great atmosphere, great tension. James Wan knows how to film a movie. Like, just the slow shots going down hallways and stuff. Even if nothing happens, it's still scary. It's still full of atmosphere. So, The Conjuring, for a genre I'm not really into, this is definitely one of the better ones, especially in modern times. At number 17, I'm going with Lone Wolf McQuade, and this was requested by Jason from Backtrack Cinema. Thanks for the request. Pretty badass flick. I caught this one on Tubi if you're interested on seeing it. It's like almost like a modern western mixed with action, and it's just a really cool film. There's some martial arts in here, a little bit of everything that's badass, and starring Chuck Norris, so he definitely brings the badass to this role and most of his roles. And the villain in here is played by David Carradine, and he's so damn good as our villain as well. A lot of people know him from Bill, from Kill Bill. And of course, he was the Kung Fu Master before this film, so off a TV series. So it was really cool to see him in this. And Chuck Norris's character, he's this Texas Ranger who doesn't take shit from anybody. A great shot, and just, like I said, a complete badass, obviously, played by Chuck Norris. And the whole end battle between him and David Carradine is just so awesome and badass. They end up in this martial arts battle. And McQuade's obviously a lone wolf, given the title of this film. And he ends up getting a new partner in here who is Chakotay. I don't know his real name, but he's Chakotay on Star Trek Voyager. That's how I know him. And yeah, them two, they end up forming a relationship. And he ends up becoming good friends with them over the course of this film. So he's like this loner who drinks beer all the time and has a wolf as a pet, but he slowly starts to come out of his shell throughout this film, with the new girlfriend he acquires and everything. Then you find out that she's in with David Carradine's character, the villain. They're all kind of involved together. And the cherry on top is Dana Kimmel from Friday the 13th Part 3, Chris Higgins. She is McQuade's daughter, and she ends up getting kidnapped by the villain, and it makes for a really great adventure revenge type flick. So if you haven't seen it, it's definitely a product of its time, but the best type of product of its time. It's so 80s, but it's so damn fun. Up next at number 16, we got Once Upon a Time in the West, requested by Zach. Thanks, Zach. I am very inexperienced when it comes to westerns. It's a genre, one of the only genres where I barely watched any movies in. I really Need to change that. So I'm glad that this was requested, an old school 60s spaghetti western by Sergio Leone or Leone, however you want to say that. I had no idea these films were made in Italy. Interesting enough, especially looking at the cast. But yeah, this movie just had so much style, great score, great story and characters, really engaging, and just not what I was expecting. It was just really good, and it kind of got me more interested to check out more westerns, especially the bigger ones like this film. Um, Casting Henry Fonda as your villain, Frank, that's just unheard of at the time. He was always the good guy, the protagonist. Charles Bronson is another badass in this film. Harmonica. I love every time he shows up. You hear that harmonica playing in the background. Everybody got like their own score in here, their own like theme song when they show up, which is great. The cinematography is just so beautiful and, like I said, engaging, and just so much eye candy here. And it's a longer film, but the pacing's pretty good. Aside from the first 10 minutes, it takes a while to get going. I know that's on purpose, like where the guy waiting there for the train and the windmill slowly turning or wherever the hell that is, and like the fly on his face. I'm like, is this movie gonna start or what? But I do get that that was all intentional. But for the most part, the pacing's pretty good for this length of a movie, and there's some shocking scenes in here. When they massacre that family at the first, did not see that coming at all. I'm like, whoa. What am I getting myself into? Cheyenne, I forget who plays him, but he's another great character in here. He's like a bandit who is framed for the murdering that family, which it wasn't really him. And yeah, he's just such an interesting character. Interesting morals to him and everything, and definitely a complex character, more than meets the eye at first. So yeah, just a great flick. And when you find out what Charles Bronson's character Harmonica, what he's really out to do at the very end, you kind of figure out everything. You're like, wow, just such a clever film, very stylistic, visually stunning, and yeah, great. Ahead of its time, I feel, for the 60s. But like, again, I'm very new to this genre. This was the first time watch, so I feel like on rewatch, this one will most likely climb up if I were to redo this ranking. So yeah, I really enjoyed it as my first watch. I'm excited to rewatch it and check out more westerns. So thanks, Zach, for requesting this one. Up next at number 15, I'm going with Uncle Buck, and this was requested by A Million Resets. Thanks for the request. A really fun comedy starring John Candy as his uncle has to babysit his nieces and nephews while their parents are out. The oldest daughter in the family, his niece, is kind of an angsty teen, and she's not fond of her Uncle Buck. And over the course of the film, they start to bond more by the end, and that's real nice to see. While the other two kids, one of them played by Macaulay Culkin, they're much younger, and you get a lot more goofy humor with them. And so I feel like this movie works for the whole family. If you're a kid watching this, you're going to really enjoy the kid moments in the film, like when John Candy makes all the food for breakfast, all that stuff, putting the clothes in the microwave to dry, and little things like that are just hilarious. It just shows that he doesn't have much parenting skills. He's very new to this. And yeah, it's just really fun to watch. And John Candy obviously pulls it off. Macaulay Culkin, this role got him the job for Home Alone, so that's great as well. So this movie is very important in cinema history. And it's one of my favorite John Hughes films. Not the only John Hughes films on this ranking either, which is funny enough. Yeah, just very solid flick with a lot of heartfelt moments, a lot of funny moments. I love the moment where he's like drilling through the door to get that dude to scare him. It's so funny. Or like getting an axe out of his trunk, just trying to scare off the niece's boyfriend. Just so many great scenes, and from his car backfiring all the time to sound like gunshots going off. There's just so many funny scenes in here that I can't remember them all, but it's definitely one that it's been way too long since I watched, and I can't wait to rewatch it actually. Up next at number 14, we got another John Hughes film, Weird Science. Now, technically, Uncle Buck's probably a better film than this. I just get so much entertainment value out of Weird Science. It's such a bizarre film that would never be able to be made today. Um, it's about these kids, these teens, who create a female, like a model, uh, out of their computer using science. It's bizarre, it's goofy, it makes zero sense, but it doesn't have to be. It's definitely a turn your brain off type movie. And the things that these kids have to deal with once they create this woman, they don't have a clue what to do with her. They're very shy. They're always like made fun of in school and bullied and stuff. So they don't get to talk to girls like they would want to or anything. And this girl gets them out of their shell, basically. And there's some funny things concerning the kids and her at first, like sexually, like they take a shower together and the kids are too shy or embarrassed to take off their boxers or anything. They're in the shower with her like that. But the movie quickly moves on from that, which is good. It doesn't just rely on that as its main joke. It's more about this female they create, Lisa, they call her. She helps them, like I said, come out of their shell, become less shy, be more brave, stand up for themselves, and get the courage to date women their age. So she's doing a great thing for these kids, really. And like this movie goes in wild places, whether they're at the bar and the kids are getting drunk. Anthony Michael Hall is one of the kids, and he is hilarious in this film, especially when he's drunk. He has his really high pitched voice when he's drinking, and he's just acting a real goofball. Kelly LeBrock plays the female, and man, was she smoking hot. Definitely perfect for the role at the time. Forget the other kid's name. That's not Anthony Michael Hall. There's two kids in this. The other one, forget the actor's name, but he even gets to kiss her, and he takes it way too far. Apparently, she was not impressed filming this scene because I guess he even threw in some tongue, and she told him that was the last straw. You'd pull anything like that again, she'd kick his ass. So it didn't last too long, but any kid in his position at 15 or 16 would have done the same thing, so don't blame him. But yeah, awful for her to have to experience that, right? And of course, rest in peace, Bill Paxton. He's great in here as well as the older brother who's always picking on his younger brother. And yeah, he's kind of hilarious in here. Real dickhead, and he really gets what he deserves at the end when he turns into this gross ass monster thing. Yeah, the movie's just very fantastical too, right? Because the girl can make magic out of thin air, basically, and how she like creates a scenario to make the kids brave at the end by making these mutant bikers show up. And the movie goes in many wild directions, but it's always fun. It's always entertaining. The definition of a popcorn flick. I mean, when they're doing their science experiment, they put bras on their heads. It's just so funny. Again, a movie that would never be able to be made today, but I'm glad it was made back in the day, so it's definitely a cult classic for good reason. So I'm glad movie Misfits. I'm glad Chris requested this. Great choice, man. Up next at lucky number 13, we're going with Poltergeist. Odd that lined up. This was requested by Horrorhead Heather. Thanks, Heather, for the request. Again, another obviously Poltergeist haunted house type flick, which again isn't my thing, but this one is. There's a reason why it's so damn iconic. It is a very good flick, directed by Tobe Hooper, but it was pretty much really directed by Steven Spielberg. I think he had a lot to say about this film, like in regards to producing it and stuff. So it feels more like a Spielberg film than a Tobe Hooper film. Definitely one of the more accessible Hooper films out there. So I think that's another reason why it works so well. Just, yeah, kind of set the template for all haunted house movies to come after this, or not possession, but like ghost type stories. When the little girl, Carol Ann, when she's looking at the TV all static, she's like, they're here. Such a great line. So many creepy moments too for this being a PG film. Like, it's hard to believe. This came out before PG-13 existed, so I imagine if it would have came out a little later, it definitely would have had the PG-13 rating. There's some creepy stuff in here, let me tell you. One crazy scene is when that guy's like pulling his face off in the mirror when he's hallucinating. Definitely the standout scene for me. Great effects there, but we got the creepy clown doll. We got the tree. So many creepy moments in here, and the practical effects are friggin' pretty damn awesome. The digital effects are pretty good for the year too, in 1982. a little outdated, but doesn't bother me at all. And really interesting story to this one. And you know how all these movies, they bring in the paranormal investigators to check out their house or whatever. I feel like when they did it in this film, it was pretty original at the time, where we see it all the time now. So again, a movie that so many other movies are influenced by. Yeah, it's just great. You see this parodied everywhere, from Family Guy to Simpsons and everything too. So it's a big name. It's iconic. You know, the whole twist of how they built over a graveyard and, you know, only moved the graves and not the bodies is another great twist. And there's a lot of foreshadowing going on with that, you know, with the bird dying and then flushing them down the toilet. Little things like that all add up. And then when you add on all the theories, the conspiracies, the weird, bizarre stuff that happens surrounding this film, just in the making and the behind the scenes, that again just really elevates this film and just makes it even more interesting, whether it be for better or worse. Carol Ann, the little girl, played her. Obviously, she passed during part 3. She is so good in here, and as is the rest of the family are great as well. So one of the better films in a genre I'm not really a fan of, but I always return to this one every few years. Up next, at number 12, I'm going with Total Recall. And this was requested by the Midnight Woodsman. Thanks for the request, band. And yeah, this was actually a first time watch for me, believe it or not. It was like the biggest Arnold movie I haven't seen. Always knew about it, just never had it growing up. Never happened to have rented it, so film kind of passed me by. Pretty damn good flick though. Definitely a solid movie. Really interesting story to this. Where Arnold's character is having these dreams of being this agent on Mars and everything. And then you come to find out that might be real after doing this simulation. This little experiment that he goes into, and reality and his dreams start mixing, and you're not really sure what the hell's going on. And like I said, this was a first time watch for me, so it's hard to remember all the pieces, but I do really remember enjoying it. The effects are really good in this. I think they won an award for effects back in the day, and for good reason. I mean, they're pretty horrific for not being a horror movie. There's scenes where like you're on Mars without your helmet on, and the eyes like pop out of their head and everything. Really gnarly effects. And the action is great as well. And when you do get action and they're shooting people, you see the blood flying. And so this movie definitely deserves its R rating. Like I said, it's not confusing or anything. It's just that I only seen it once and there's a lot to take in. So I don't remember everything that was going on, but I do like the way things played out. We had some great action, some great acting itself, and the performances were on par. You know, one of the better Arnold movies in terms of his performance, I feel. He really gives it on this one, and yeah, visually it's stunning. Great score to this one as well, so definitely one I'll be returning to watch in the future. Up next, at number 11, we got Clive Barker's Hellraiser. Another classic. This one was requested by Hugh Poque. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Thanks for the request. Hellraiser, a franchise I never dove real deep into, but I have seen the original many times. The original in part 2 and the remake. I've seen pieces of part 3, but I really need to rewatch that and all the rest of these so I can rank this franchise one of these days. But I haven't heard good things in the later sequels. That's why I stayed away from it. But this is a very solid first film. Going into it, you think that you would see Pinhead and all these Cenobites being like the main ones, the main villains, but they're not in the movie all that much, to be honest. But when they are, they definitely make their presence known. And I love the whole pain and pleasure, and it really depends on the person if it's pain or pleasure, right? And some people seek it, which is what Frank did, Uncle Frank, and then he tries escaping them back to the real world. And when he does, man, the effects are so good. He's this like slimy corpse, and you see the meat and everything. Oh, great friggin' effects. I love the way like his body comes together and everything. It's just really well done. And over the course of the film, he gets his lover to bring people home from the bar, kill them with a hammer so he can devour them and become more and more whole, more human over the period of this film. And eventually the Cenobites come to get him and they want him back, right? So it's a very original, interesting concept. and it's not something that you really expect going into this. I also love Kirsty. I think her name's Kirsty. Yeah, it's a weird name. You don't hear it too often. The niece in here, Frank's niece, and she ends up having to stop him at the end. And just the cube itself, the puzzle box, figuring that out, and everything surrounding this film is, again, just very original. It's got great effects. It's pretty damn dark, and it mixes like eroticism with disgusting body horror really well, which is not an easy task to pull off. So yeah, Hellraiser, definitely a franchise I have to look deeper into because this first flick is pretty damn amazing and I get enjoyment out of part 2. Reaching my top 10 is Brian De Palma's Blowout. This was requested by Mary Smith. Thanks for the request. It's a film I've only heard about like a year ago for the first time ever, funny enough. So I'm glad you requested it. It was on my watch list. And wow, what an overlooked gem, man. Like, again, this is a first time watch, so perhaps when I rewatch it, I'll love it even more. But yeah, I was pretty blown away by this film starring John Travolta, and he ends up witnessing a conspiracy where a governor who's running for president ends up dying. They say it was an accident, but he believes it was done on purpose. So he starts trying to figure out what's going on, and he recorded the audio for it. And, you know, he's trying to put the pieces together, but then he realizes there's people out there that don't want the truth to be heard. And yeah, it's just a great mystery that plays out, and you're not sure if John Travolta's character is going to be safe by the end of this film. Will people try to take him out for knowing the truth and whatnot? All that's super interesting. And plus, Travolta's character is like a sound engineer or whatnot for movies. Like, he adds in all the effects and whatnot in post, which is really cool to see some behind the scenes on that, because they're like making some type of slasher film at the starting of this, and he can never find the right scream for a girl in the film. And the way they do find the right scream, it all comes back at the end of the film. And there's multiple scenarios in here where you see stuff at the start that don't seem like it matters much, and then it comes back in the end in a very big way, a big unique way. It makes it come full circle, which is great. The cast is great in here. The female lead, I can't remember her name, but she's great with Travolta. And this is one of Travolta's best performances, honestly. This and Pulp Fiction are probably my two favorite performances by the guy. The directing, of course, is phenomenal from Brian De Palma. We get a lot of great shots, some shots that go in circles, some split screen shots. Everything that's in here is definitely a part of his style and signature. And this is like 1981, I believe. So another film that was kind of ahead of its time. But I just don't get why it disappeared under the radar, this film. Like, no one talks about it. So again, I'm glad you requested it. It has somewhat of a bleak, nihilistic ending, but I kind of love it for that. And a lot of 70s, early 80s films had that, and it's kind of a lost art nowadays. You always expect this happy ending, right? But that wasn't the case back then. You never knew how things were going to play out, and I respect it for that. And lastly, John Lithgow is also in this movie as one of the villains, and he is so damn good in here. I always love John Lithgow, and this is no exception in one of his earlier roles. Damn great actor. Coming up next at number 9, we got Iron Will, and this was requested by Ledger Forever. Thanks for the request. I know this is one of your favorite films, and it is really good. I wasn't sure if I seen it before. I didn't think I did, but when I was rewatching this or watching it, I was like, I remember little pieces here and there. So I must have caught this on TV as a kid or something, right? It's a Disney flick, but yeah, it's just very inspiring, that's for sure. We get this underdog story where this late teen joins this race, this dog sled race that goes from Canada to the States. This big long trek that's very dangerous, and he has to set aside his fears to do this race, and he's doing it for his dad. His dad ends up losing his life at the starting of this film, and he was going to do the race. So their family's in financial struggles right now and everything, and he wants to go to college. So this is one way where they can win enough money, the prize money, to help his family out. So all odds are against him, but as the movie goes on, you see he's persistent, he's kind-hearted, he'll go out of his way to save other people's lives in the race, which will cost him time. and how he doesn't realize how dangerous this is at first with the elements and how cold it can get with frostbite and everything. So Iron Will definitely has a double meaning in here because his name's Will and he has an iron will, right? Kevin Spacey's in here. He does a pretty good job as like this reporter, this journalist. At first, it seems like he's just kind of exploiting Will to gain views and get attention. But as the story goes along, you see he's really behind Will, and he really rallies all of America to be on his side by the end. So he wasn't really there to hurt Will's character or to exploit him to gain success and money and stuff, right? So that's great. There's this like I think Swedish guy in the race who's this real dickhead. He's kind of the bad guy in the film. He's out to hurt other people and win the race at all costs. And I'm kind of surprised at the length that he went, especially for a Disney movie. It gets pretty crazy. And by the end, it's just really heartfelt. Like I said, really inspiring and just a great story overall. It's actually based on a true story too, believe it or not. My only little nitpick was concerning the father's death at the first. He dies going into the water, going over a frozen lake or something like that, and he ends up drowning. It worked, but I felt like it could have been more impactful, like the way it was filmed and set up. It just didn't hit me emotionally like I wanted it to. It could have been more impactful. But aside from that, really killer movie. It kind of surprised me. Made my top 10. Up next at number 8, I got The Green Mile. And this was requested by Paul B. Thanks for the request. Huge ass movie. I've always known of it. I just never got around to watching it. I just never caught this one for some reason. This is the last first time watch on my ranking. Everything else above this I've seen before. So, but yeah, really captivating movie. I can definitely see why it's so loved and praised for its performances all around. Everybody is friggin' magnificent in here. I mean, Tom Hanks is always great, but the rest of the cast are all so good. And it's a really touching and deep story. I feel it deals with the Green Mile, which is where they keep the people in jail ready for execution, basically death row. And Michael Clarke plays this like giant in this film, this big ass guy who was charged for doing awful things to kids, killing them and other things. But you kind of figure even like close to the start of this film, you kind of figure he didn't do it, but you're interested on who did it and finding out how everything played out and why was he accused. And obviously the journey is what's so fun in this film, interesting. And for dealing with all these death row prisoners, it's kind of funny that the most despicable character is actually Percy, one of the guards. It's like he is such a piece of shit and you want to see him get the chair immediately once you meet him. He's so terrible. One of the worst characters who's not supposed to be the villain, but really is the villain in any film that I've seen. He's god awful, despicable. But yeah, John Coffey is just such a nice character, and he's like a giant, right? He's huge, and he has the power to cure people's ailments, whatever they have going on with them. Like for instance, Tom Hanks' character has a problem with he has like a urinary infection or something like that. His pissers broke. So he ends up curing him of that, and that's when Tom Hanks really starts to see the magic that this guy can perform and how good he could be for society, and just he sees the good in him, right? And I don't think he really believes that he did what he's accused of. So it's just a really great film, whether we're talking about like the mouse in the jail, where again Percy always wants to kill it, but everybody else just wants to see the mouse live. He's hanging out with one of the prisoners and actually becomes best friends with that prisoner. So it's surprisingly, most of the prisoners are actually the kindest characters you've ever seen. Aside from one, I believe he's played by Sam Rockwell, and he's just a real crazy lunatic and deserves to be there, that's for sure. So at the end of the day, this is like a really well thought out, almost 3-hour long movie. I think it would have played out better as a miniseries, but then again, less people would have seen it. So I'm glad it's a movie and it went to theaters, it won awards. and it got the recognition it deserves, because this does deserve all the praise that it got over the years. Like I said, it's just fun following this mystery and learning about all these characters. And by the end of the day, you feel like you know these characters personally. So again, it is really well written. And surprisingly, this is a Stephen King adaptation, I believe. So there again, every time he doesn't touch horror, he seems like he wins awards. So good for everybody who was involved with this film. Coming up next at number 7, I'm going with American Psycho, requested by Garrett Jones. Thanks for the request. Another film I've seen multiple times, but each time it just gets better and better. You notice a little bit more here and there, more details. It's a film I didn't really get the first time I watched, but I definitely do now. Patrick Bateman, man, such an interesting character who kind of has an alter ego of a serial killer while also being like this financial, like banking executive or something like that. It's kind of irrelevant to the plot, but he's this high up wealthy guy, right? So he can kind of get away with murder in that, and no one would really suspect him. And it gets to the point where he's not even really trying to hide it all that much, and everybody around him is still oblivious to what's going on. And it's just so funny because this group of friends that he has keeps mistaking everybody. No one really has an identity because they're all striving to be the best. And just Bateman's like routines is as insane, how he has to have like the perfect skin and he wears this mask and everything, which again is kind of referencing what's going on in the movie, right? How he wears two faces. All the way up to the ending where it's kind of like you're not sure what to think's going on. Is this in his head? Did this really happen? Is everybody this oblivious around him, or is he just going crazy? And it's really ambiguous at the end, and I kind of love it for that. There's no like definite answer, even though I do like to believe that Bateman did do all these things, that he is actually a psycho, you know, at the end of the day. And it's just funny how obsessed they are about their like business cards, and how it's like, oh, his looks better than mine. It has a better font, and the coloring and the watermark and all that shit cracks me up every time. To where he's like killing people in his apartment, and he's talking about Genesis and Phil Collins, and just like the way he moves and stuff, and he's like literally setting himself up to kill this guy with newspaper on the ground and the raincoat and everything. But the guy's kind of oblivious to what's going on. He doesn't expect him to do anything like that, and you really get to see his reality. He's like losing focus of reality, what's real and what's not, and you really get to see that near the end of the film, like where he's like trying to feed the cat to the ATM machine and all these weird things going on. But yeah, definitely an interesting movie. One that I can't see ever being remade. It just doesn't make sense to remake a movie like this. There's just so much to this film. It definitely takes multiple watches to pull back all the layers, but it's definitely a fun one to rewatch every once in a while. Coming up next at number 6 is Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Might surprise some people that this one's this high. This was requested by Godzilla fans, so they're obviously a fan of this film as well. And yeah, this is probably my favorite Godzilla movie that I've watched. I'd even take this over the original. I know it's blasphemy, but this is just my type of Godzilla flick. Lots of monster battles, Godzilla just tearing it up, being badass, Ghidorah as the best villain this franchise has ever seen, and how he's like from outer space or whatnot. It's so powerful, like controlling all the other monsters on Earth. He thinks he's the true alpha, when really Godzilla believes he's the true alpha, which he really is, right? And all their battles are so awesome, and seeing all the other monsters as well, like Mothra, she gets a lot of great screen time on here, and a nice little battle at the end against Rodan, who is another badass monster. Of course, the human characters in here aren't as great as they could be, like most Godzilla movies, but they're serviceable. They're pretty good. Vera Farmiga, I didn't like her at all the first time I seen this, but I grown to like her character a little bit more, even though her motives are really dumb. She thinks that releasing all these monsters is gonna be a great environmental change for the Earth, but she doesn't realize it's gonna kill pretty much all the humans and cause huge destruction. So not a great plan, but she redeems herself by the end with the sacrifice she makes, so that's great. So I just love everything about this movie, especially when we're dealing with the kaijus or the monsters, whatever you want to call them. Just a lot of badass action scenes with them. So gotta give it to this movie. And the final battle with Ghidorah and Godzilla is just so damn epic. I love that last shot where he rips off the head and he's like blows through it there, his atomic breath or whatever. So damn iconic at this point, and I just really love this flick. Reaching my top 5 heavy hitters at this point. At number 5, I'm going with Interstellar. A movie that I was excited to rewatch. Again, I've only seen it when it came out. I thought it was good. I'm glad I rewatched it because now it's amazing. Such a good movie. Christopher Nolan, he doesn't do much wrong, man. And his directing is so on point here. Visually, it's so stunning. Cinematography is out of this world. Great, engaging story, especially for its length. It never feels boring. Even when it gets super sciencey and stuff, I'm still super engaged into it. And it does a really good job at dealing with the science in the film and making it as realistic as possible, I suppose. So he gets a lot of the sci-fi elements right, but he also gets the characters right as well. Matthew McConaughey is a father in this who goes on this journey into space and leaving his daughter behind. And it's a tough decision because it's to save humanity, but at the same time, you're ruining your daughter's childhood. She doesn't get to grow up with a father. And you miss all these special moments with her. So it has just as much to do with family and fatherhood as it does with with sci-fi elements, right? With all the science stuff. So I think you get the best of both worlds here. And I do love when we get into space, we go through black holes, when we go on planets and times different, time is relevant depending on where you are, right? So you could be on this planet, but it's really like 10 years for the people who are not on that planet. All that stuff is super cool to me. And yeah, just the big twist at the end revealing on who are these higher beings that sent them on this mission in the first place. So clever, so well thought out. I've been talking for so long, I can't remember if I'm saying everybody's name, giving a shout out to all the subscribers. So hopefully I didn't miss anybody. I'll throw it in during the edit if I do forget, but just in case I forgot, for Interstellar, it was Crazy Cat TB who requested it. So thanks for the request, man. Moving on. Up next at number 4, I went with A Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors Part 3. Such a damn good movie. My second favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie. It's almost a bit like a superhero movie at times if you think about it, with all these kids finding out they can have powers in their dreams and they can use that to actually fight against Freddy. There's actually a chance to win against Freddy in the dreams, which is really cool. But before I forget, this was requested by Nebula Harmony. So thanks for the request. You picked a great movie. Yeah, these top movies are so hard to place, let me tell you. But yeah, Dream Warriors is definitely one of the best. It's got such great practical effects, whether we're talking about the whole puppeteer scene with the kid getting his tendons like ripped out and that's probably one of my favorite in the franchise, to welcome to primetime, bitch, and the girl's head going through the TV. There's so many great moments in here, especially in regards to the kills. The chick who had a heroin addiction or drug addiction, and Freddy's knives become like syringes, needles. It's like, want to get high? Let's get high. Love all those moments. So, and Freddy has a great balance between evil and comedic in here. It doesn't go too far into the comedy, but there is still a little bit of it here. He does have some snappy one-liners in here, so that's great. Nancy comes back in a really great way. They don't kill her off right away. She does end up dying, but I felt like it was earned in the film. She gets to do what she has to do before she goes out, protect these kids at all costs. My only, again, little nitpick in this film is when they go to the junkyard to get rid of Freddy's remains, or to bury them properly or whatever. I don't like how his skeleton comes up and fights them. I thought that was kind of dumb, and I always thought that was kind of dumb. Only thing keeping this movie from a perfect 10 out of 10 masterpiece, but it's almost there. It's so close. So yeah, I freaking love this film. Great dream sequences, or nightmares I should say. Great kills, a great Freddy. Everything's pretty great around this. There's not much complaining to do with Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. Reaching my top 3, I ended up going with Doctor Sleep, requested by Andrew Capurro. Thanks for the request. And wow, what a hell of a movie. Wasn't expecting this much greatness when I heard it announced. I mean, The Shining is a lot to live up to, and Mike Flanagan totally pulled it off. I'm actually at the point where I'm not sure which movie I like more. I like them both for different reasons. I actually love them both for different reasons. And for this movie being so long, like a very lengthy film, I've seen it so many times and it never gets boring. It never feels like a drag. The first part is a little slower, but I feel like that's needed to really tell the story that they were going for. Ewan McGregor freaking kills it as Danny in here, a grown-up Danny. And, you know, he's suffering from a lot of the same things his father did at the starting of this film. He has a lot of things bottled up, and he's resorting to alcoholism and different things. The film deals with that in the first act, but once he gets over that and he starts working with this little girl, it's so damn good. This little girl, I think she's named Abra, and she has the shining like no other person has. She has it by the tons, and she is extremely powerful even as a child. And they have to take on this group of people who are almost like vampires, and they're like sucking the shining out of people, draining them until they die. And they're living many, many years. They're becoming basically immortal as long as they can keep taking in the shining, right? So it's right, great concept and much different than the movie The Shining itself. But it takes it in a great direction. And also this movie does a great job of being a sequel to The Shining, but also being a great companion piece to The Shining book. Like it does it in a way to not piss off Stephen King like the original movie did, but also not piss off the movie lovers of the first film. So it just balances things really well. Rebecca Ferguson as our main villain of this group killing people, she is so damn good. This is my favorite performance from her as Rose the Hat, man. This is such a cool character, even though she seems more powerful than what she actually is, especially when she's going against this little girl who is so powerful. I just love seeing this little girl kick people's asses with her mind and stuff. And oh man, it's just such a fun and empowering movie to watch for some reason. I don't know why. And I love everything about the movie, and the cherry on top's when they go back to the Overlook Hotel at the end. And we get a lot of callbacks to the original film. And you're like, oh shit, what are these ghosts in this hotel gonna do to Rose when she shows up? So great friggin' flick with a great ending. It's very satisfying, and I wouldn't even mind them coming out with another addition to this franchise following Abra when she grows up. Maybe they could throw in another story here. I'd be super down and interested because this is one of the best. Coming in at number 2, I ended up going with The Thing. This was requested by Top 5 Station. Thanks for the request. One of my favorite horror movies of all time. I love everything about it. There's no flaws, really. This is the best John Carpenter movie, in my opinion. Even better than Halloween. It has a really great cast. Kurt Russell in the leading role of Mac. He's fucking hilarious. It's this pilot who likes to drink, but he also takes charge when he needs to and doesn't take shit from nobody once stuff starts going down. And this movie is so filled with paranoia because it's about a shape-shifting alien, right? So you never know who is this alien. It could be your best friend and you not know it because they can impersonate them almost perfectly. And I think that is just such a cool storyline for your film. I said paranoia is at an all-time high. There's lots of tension. Love the winter landscape. There's nowhere to run. So it's just a perfectly well-made film with lots of thrills, great practical effects, some of the best ever made to this day. People are still talking about the effects of this movie, from like the spider creature to when the dog splits open, and you're always kind of guessing what the original look of this thing was, you know, because it always has pieces of its past creations in its monsters. So it's so damn good, man. I don't know what else to say about what I've already said everything in my John Carpenter ranking that I did. So if you want to hear more about The Thing, go check that out because This movie is masterful, man. The score matches the movie so well, and the winter landscape. You never know who the thing is, even at the end of the film. It still kind of keeps you guessing on how things are really going to play out. So, yeah, damn good movie. But of course, there could only be one first place, and if you've seen what movies were mentioned, obviously I had to go with The Terminator from 1984, the original. This was requested by SPC Unleash, my buddy Austin. Go check out his channel if you haven't. And yeah, just my second favorite movie of all time. Some days it's my favorite. It's definitely always in top 3 with Shaun of the Dead's, Butterfly Effect pretty much. Screams up there sometimes too. But yeah, The Terminator, the greatest sci-fi action horror movie ever made. It blends so many genres so well. Arnold playing this robotic T-800, this Terminator. He wasn't the best at his English at the time, so this was like the perfect role for him, being like with his movements and his speech in that. It just really worked, and he was definitely intimidating as the character, right? You wouldn't want to run into him. And of course, I love even the romance side to the movie with Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese, Michael Biehn and Linda Hamilton. They play it so well in here, and you don't expect to be touched by the relationship in here. When they first meet, they're total strangers. Kyle knows of Sarah, heard about his whole life, but he never got to meet her till now. And through the little bit of time they spend together, they really form a strong bond, and for good reason, because all the human existence depends on their mission, right? The robots are trying to take out Sarah Connor so she can't have John, the leader of the resistance. So just a movie, again, that's ahead of its time. It's more relevant today than ever with AI and everything coming out. This may actually happen one of these days where the robots and AI turn on us. So I always thought this movie one day could be based on a true story, perhaps. But yeah, I'm a sucker for time travel films, so that again elevates this film. There's great action in here. There's some actual tension. There's some horrific stuff in here. And I love the journey that Sarah goes on. She starts off as this kind of nobody waitress who doesn't really seem like she's going anywhere in life, to by the end realizes how important she really is and takes charge, becomes a badass by the final scene, which, she plays out all in Terminator 2. But by the end of this film, she becomes that character and realize how important her and John, her future son, is going to be. So I love everything about this movie. There's nothing wrong with it. You could say a couple scenes are outdated, whether you're talking about the stop motion or the effects on like Arnold's eye, but to me, I've seen this movie since I was a baby, so it never did bother me. It's one I rented as a child. It's one I've owned multiple times, still own multiple copies to this day, and it's an annual watch, obviously. I'm always putting on the Terminator. The franchise as a whole has some rough patches, but the first 2 films are pretty much flawless in my book. James Cameron's best movie, one of my favorite movies of all time, so it easily ends up first place in subscriber month. So there you have it, guys. I finally reached the end. 30 movies up, 30 movies down. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, don't be mad if your movie was too low on my list. It's just my list. It's just my personal taste. I'm just grateful that you're one of my subscribers and you're here to support the channel. If this does well and if you guys enjoy videos like this, I will definitely return and do more things and get you guys involved, to give me options and suggestions on what rankings to do. So keep that in mind for the future. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, if you're new to the channel and want to get on the action the next time I do something like this. And the next time I do something like this, it won't be the first 30 people to give me movie suggestions. I'll take everybody's suggestion and then like pick from a hat or something to make it more fair, because if you didn't see my post right away, you wouldn't have been able to be into this, because I think it was like 12 hours. I already had like 30 picks, or less than a day anyway. I already had 30 picks and I had to cut it off. I'm like, I can't have more movies than that, guys. Sorry. So yes, this was a whole lot of fun. Again, I'm just grateful for your guys' support. And that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, thanks for watching.